My name's Andrew Farquharson, and welcome. And I'm a psychotherapist, and I work in the area of applied positive psychology. And tonight, I'm going to be sort of joined in a conversation with Abby and hopefully Caroline if she gets here.
Just logging on, I believe. She just sent a message to say she was just trying to log on, so she should be with us in a minute.
I just thought she might have a long way to come. That's it. And we're just going to have a sort of conversation. But first of all, I'll introduce Abby, if you can see her picture. And Abby is a psychologist and a former teacher. I should also mention I'm a former teacher as well. And Caroline is a psychotherapist and also works with applied positive psychology.
You just want to say where we're all based as well, because we're all kind of spread out across the UK a little bit, aren't we?
All right, yeah, I suppose we are. Yes, I'm based in Edinburgh. And where are you, Abby?
I'm in Staffordshire, so I'm kind of on the Staffordshire-Derbyshire border in the Midlands.
Yeah, and Caroline's in Lincolnshire, I think. So, and unfortunately, we were going to have. I'm just got a message that Caroline can't get in without the password. There isn't the password.
I know that. I've just had somebody else say the same thing. Hold on a second.
So
okay. Again,
if you would all, with the exception of Abby, mute your mics, please, not because I don't want to hear you, it's just because it will cut out any background noise and so on. If for some reason you don't want to have the video on, you can also turn that off, and it's in the bottom left of your screen. The chat part, if you want to ask a question, just write it on the chat, and as we go along, we'll attempt to answer it. And if we can't answer it then, we'll answer it at the end. And if for some reason we can't answer it then, we'll come back to it, and I'll put answers on a website. So, very odd. Sorry, I'm just looking at this thing and it's asking about a password and don't have one. So it's weird.
I've just sent the link and just said try it again because yeah, I'm not sure what happened.
Well, we'll just get started anyway. So again, welcome everyone. As you may have noticed over the last few weeks, most of us have been in the house quite a bit of isolation, but this has caused all sorts of interesting things to happen. If we've got children, it might have meant that we've suddenly come into become or expected to become some sort of teacher. If we are lucky enough to be able to work from home, then it might be that we're clashing and banging against everybody in the house, and it's not quite such a good thing. And all of these things tend to lead to anxiety and other mental well-being issues. And this will only get worse as these things go on, because it's all to do with the sense of the unknown, really. And there's quite a bit of research now with the isolation, even though it's only been a few weeks in the UK, but around the world, looking at the effects of it on people. And of course, as somebody pointed out to me the other day, one of the ways to punish people in prison is to put them in isolation. But hopefully it will not come to all of that. It's meant to be the Easter holidays at the moment for schools. And so, Abby, what are your thoughts on that sort of thing, the holidays and people being expected or feeling anxious about being teachers or whatever?
I think across education at the moment, wherever you are, probably in the world, there's a lot of pressure on everybody. I think parents particularly feel a huge amount of pressure, but where that pressure actually comes from I suppose, is a different matter, because there'll be people, there's parents who feels like school aren't doing enough. I spoke to some teacher friends of mine yesterday, one of them who was saying that they've had 2 worksheets for their child and that's all that they've been given. And then you've got parents that are feeling like they've been totally thrown at the deep end with stacks and stacks of work, that sort of 14 weeks worth. They've been thrown loads of websites, they've been given activities, and they feel like they're drowning in it and they don't know where to begin. And then I think there's a lot of parents out there that are putting a lot of pressure on themselves. I think they feel like they're doing that for the benefit of the child, but there's almost quite a perfectionist thing about it, and they're kind of overdoing it really, and they're putting the pressure on their child that's starting to feel anxious as well. But I think what has become evident is that there's very little guidelines set by the government about how much work should actually be provided by schools. So I've seen some quite interesting articles from teachers across the UK, sort of on union chats and things. One school somewhere, I probably shouldn't say where, has said that if their children don't do the work that they've been set to a high enough standard, then they're going to be made to go in on Saturdays when they return to school. Well, that's just outrageous, because the government haven't set any kind of guidelines about how much work people should be doing at home. And I think the reality is that parents are not teachers. I trained for 4 years to become a teacher, and it still then took another couple of years on the job. Andrew, I'm sure you're the same. It took a long time to get to grips with being a teacher and all that involves. And actually, there's going to be teachers at home with their own children that are really struggling, to teach their own children, because it's not a classroom environment. It's completely out of the order. I mean, you can't recreate that at home. And my thought on that is that you shouldn't even try, because a parent-child relationship is very different to a teacher-child relationship. That's not something that you can replicate. And actually, in the classroom, it's all about group work, it's about discussion, it's about exploring, and it's not something you can replicate. So I've seen lots of people doing all these beautiful sort of colour coordinated timetables about, right, we're going to get up at this time and we're going to do an hour of maths, and then we're going to have a bit of a break, and then we're going to do an hour of English. And I think actually that puts a lot of pressure on the parent to start with about getting it right, and am I teaching the right things, and am I doing it the right way. It puts an awful lot of pressure on the child, because they're thinking, I've got to sit at this table at home with my mum trying to teach me for 6 hours today. And I also think the reality is that the teachers are going to struggle as well, because there's going to be children that are being taught things incorrectly. Are they going to have all this marking to do? Have they got to assess all this learning that they're doing at home once they get back to school? There's so many questions around it that I actually think you'd be better to almost not do it that way. You'd be better off to make a schedule. I think it's good for your well-being to have some kind of loose plan to your day. So yes, get up, don't sleep till dinner time. Yes, say, right, okay, at some point today we're going to sit down and do an hour of what's been set by school, if school have done something like that. But I think also schedule in sort of fun time, play time, family time, time on your own, for the children as well, to sort of say, right, well, you've got an hour there to go and do what you want. You can go and read a book, you can go and play in the garden. Actually have a bit of a schedule, but not a learning timetable, because I think that just puts a huge amount of pressure on everybody. And I think however long this is going to go on for, I think the danger of that is that there's going to be a lot of bad habits put in place, and a lot of unhelpful thinking, I think, which is going to create even more anxiety in parents and children, because I think some parents are going to be trying so hard to keep their children learning. It's going to be like the swan, isn't it? Nice and calm on the top, or they're trying to remain calm for their children, and underneath they're doing that frantic paddling and not really knowing what they're doing. And actually, I think there's better ways of learning. And when your children look back on this in 20, 30 years time, ask yourself what it is you want them to remember about it. Do you want them to remember being made to sit at a table all day, having their ear chewed off and not understanding what their parents are talking about, and just being made to do worksheet after worksheet? Is that what you want your child to look back at this time as being? Or are you wanting them to look back and say, do you know what, I had a really great time with my family. We played together, we went into the garden, we made up games, we did baking, because actually there's a lot of learning still going on in those activities. And I think sitting in front of the television all day is not the way to do it either. But if you can put in things that everybody is happy to do, you're going to get much more out of that. And there's still learning going on as well. And I think we just need to think about what our children are going through here as well, because you think this is hard for you. Your child's never had to stay in the house for this amount of time ever in their whole life. They haven't seen their friends for a long time. They're having to get used to a new routine and a new way of working at home. They're probably quite anxious and worried about themselves, about things that people are talking about and they're hearing on the news. You know, what if my grandma gets ill? What if I get ill? Especially if they've got family that are key workers as well, they might be really quite worried about those, and that has the potential to show up as sort of bad behaviour at home. And if you're putting pressure on them to sit and get tasks done as well, and they've got all these underlying worries, then that can become quite a big problem. Either you're going to have bad behaviour or quite explosive outbursts. But I think we need to be kind to our children, no matter how old they are, because even if you've got older teenagers that are due to take exams this year or even in the next couple of years, they could already be worried about the impact that this is going to have on their future. And it's so uncertain for everybody. You know, teachers are worrying about this sort of stuff. So if the teachers and the adults are worrying, how are the children going to be feeling? And I think we just need to cut them a bit of slack, and cut yourself some slack as a parent as well. If you've got kids at home, you need to cut yourself a bit of slack and just sort of think, okay, we have got tasks to get through. I do want my children to still be learning, but let's find a happy, relaxed way of doing this that we can compromise together. So instead of saying, right, so we're going to get up at 9 o'clock, I want you sat at the table for 9:30 with your maths worksheets, you're getting up and saying, right, let's get some maths done today. What else do you want to do today? When are you going to put some time aside to get that task done? So compromise and have a bit of mutual respect. And if your child feels listened to and they're part of that planning, it will be much easier for everybody at home, and the atmosphere will be much, much nicer for it as well. I think as well, whether it's children or partner or animals, whoever it is, being in the same house with the same people all the time, you know, away from the whole homeschooling thing, has the potential to cause tension, especially if you're trying to make your children sit and do work, or if you're trying to work from home and you both want office space, or there's the potential for that tension to be building anyway, which if you've got children is going to have an impact on your children, but it's also going to have an impact on your relationship, your family life. I think already the statistics are saying that inquiries into divorce have gone up 25% since all this started. Domestic violence stats have gone up. There's a lot more cases of domestic violence stats, which is just awful. And as a teacher, I know that there'll be more and more cases of sort of child abuse and things going on as well. And I think if you are in that situation, or you're worried that somebody might be, we will put a list of numbers up. Am I right, Andrew?
Yeah, later on.
Yeah, we will put up a sort of crisis list of numbers if anybody is in that situation that you need to speak to somebody, because it's like a pressure pot. All this tension's building, and if people aren't dealing with it very well, then that, you know, has the potential to become a dangerous situation.
I think just come in on that. I think one of the ways that can help mitigate this in normal circumstances, and these are not normal circumstances, is and it's the same whether you're working from home or got children or whatever. It is to, as Abby says, to make a schedule, but negotiate it with the other people in the house. Negotiate the schedule. Because people will have competing things that they need to do. There might be two people in a house that require workspace. There might be the children, there might be more than one child, etc. And as part of a schedule, and is to build in some time for yourself. It's not just all about doing things together or anything like that. It's building time for yourself, and also allow yourself, and I'm sure this will be emphasized quite a bit, allow yourself the ability to sometimes to feel a bit helpless, a bit fed up, a bit miserable, because you're human. And that's so. Caroline, what have you? What sort of things have you got?
I'm so sorry, I can't actually see you. I'm just looking at a blank screen. I've had a bit of a technological meltdown this end, but hopefully
we can see you.
Is that okay? Okay. So I was just going to add in there as well. You know, I think there's a lot of misrepresentation on social media. I mean, the truth is the average home size is actually 85 square meters. And there's lots of pictures out there sort of depicting people exercising in supersized kitchens, big living spaces. And I think you're right. It's all about negotiation of space, isn't it? And yes, everybody having their chance and opportunity.
And I think setting guidelines for that as well. You know, when you're planning time on your own and sort of saying, right, I'm going to have an hour here where I'm going to go to my bedroom and I'm just going to read a book. So it'll be saying to everybody else, right, well, that's my time. I don't really want to be disturbed in that time. You don't want the kids coming in and out and mum all the time. So it's about setting those guidelines and boundaries as well, because children will respond well to that. And it will give you that time, and you'll know that you're not going to be interrupted. And plan in things like family time, or, you know, it doesn't have to be really structured. And that's why I think a schedule is better than a timetable, because you can have it a lot more loose. Yes, you can still plan in activities or bits of work, but I just think there's other things that are important for your mental wellness other than just sitting down and cramming in learning.
Yeah, and double-edged thing, isn't it, Abby? It's sort of the timetables and the schedules are good, but I think in this atmosphere they're there to change as well, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it depends on people's perspective, because, you know, there'll be people that are looking at this situation that are getting up every morning going, oh, you know, I'm trapped in the house again, I can't get out again, I feel completely out of control. And then you've got the other people that are going, do you know what, I'm never going to get this time with my family again, or I'm never going to get this time off work again. I'm going to put it to really good use. I'm going to learn to play the guitar that I've been meaning to do for years. I'm going to learn to speak Spanish on that free course that's been offered online. I'm going to book in a weekly catch up with my friends online, because I suppose one way we are really fortunate in comparison to sort of the world wars and things is we've got the technology to stay connected, even though we're isolated. And that's never happened before with anything like this. And I think, you know, we're really fortunate, especially with the school stuff. There's so many school resource websites that have sort of stepped up and said, right, we're going to offer free subscriptions to parents to help you with work, and we're going to offer free subscription to teachers, which you'd normally pay quite a lot of money for. It's making use of those things as well, if you want to sit and do those things. But I also don't think that they're absolutely necessary. I think there's other ways of learning that you can just do in your everyday without having to sit down and do maths worksheets or English worksheets and be pressured.
I don't know what you think, Abby, as a teacher, but I think children need some creative time as well, you know, creative time to themselves.
Yeah, and also, you know, they're not used to learning at home. Their home life is a place where they relax, they spend time with their family, they sleep. To suddenly have to sort of sit in one place and learn as if they were at school, that's really difficult. It's really, really difficult, and it's a big change, and it's going to take a lot of getting used to, especially when their parents are not going to learn to be a trained teacher overnight.
No, everyone's changing, aren't they?
Yeah, and I was saying before you managed to log on, but it took me 4 years to train to be a teacher, and then it took me a couple of years to get used to it. And that's in a classroom with lots of children that you're encouraging to bounce off each other. So even teachers are going to be sat at home struggling with how to homeschool their children, because it's so different. You cannot replicate that.
No. And the thing is, it's such a steep learning curve, isn't it? You know, I mean, as we know in positive psychology, we all can change, but actually we're hardwired to resist that. So it's sort of more of a gradual process. And now we've just been flung into it, haven't we, with lockdown?
And there's, like I say, there's very little guidance about what the government are expecting children to do at home, because, again, this is me, a personal thing as a teacher, but I never felt that homework was a particularly beneficial thing for children to do. You know, you send homework home to consolidate the learning, but a lot of the time it didn't really, or the parents' input, the parents had so much input that it didn't really reflect whether the child had understood or not. I mean, I was teaching primary, so I suppose that's different as children get older and they're more independent. But all this work that they're doing at home, how is that going to impact on their school education when they do go back? Because teachers are not.
Sorry, what's your view?
They're not going to be able to.
Background.
Yeah, because you work with older children, didn't you, Andrew?
Yeah, well, I basically have the view that they have in Finland. The Finnish education system is one of the best in the world, certainly the best in Europe. And one is they don't start school till they're 7. Secondly, they have the shortest school year, the shortest school days, and they don't have homework.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, Abby, it's the same thing. But that's my point of view.
And the results by the time they leave school are as good, if not better, as they are in this country.
Yes, they're always at the top of the. We're getting a bit educational now, so but
Sorry.
they're always at the top of the PISA rankings. Maybe they prefer a pizza. I don't know. Similar sort of things is when one of the problems with the virus and economic things that are associated with it is the fact that there's nothing sort of concrete we can get hold of. We don't know when it's going to end. We don't know what the effects are going to be. And that's the thing that causes people to be anxious, to be worried and fearful. And so it's really the fear of the fear that is the main problem. So the thing again that will be emphasised, and if you just take one thing away from this evening, is basically we can only control what we can control. So that in effect, there's no point in worrying about the virus or the economic effects because we can't do anything about that. But we can make sure that we wash our hands, we keep the appropriate distance from people, we don't take any unnecessary risks. We can do that. And in an economic sense, we can do all the things that we're able to do. So we feel we have a bit more control over what's going on.
Side of that coin is that you've then got people that are trying to take control in a really unhelpful way, like stocking up on toilet roll, for example. Yeah. People feel so out of control that they're desperately trying to cling onto control of something. So I suppose, yes, that is really important. Control what you're trying, what you can, but also ask whether you're doing that in a helpful way. Is that helpful, or am I just trying to get to grips with something?
That's right. I mean, when you say about taking control, you're also taking control of the way you think. And so you can effectively, as you say, Abby, you effectively go, is what I'm about to do going to help me achieve what it is that I want to achieve, or not? And so, yeah, stocking up on 20 years supply of toilet roll perhaps isn't going to help you achieve what you want to achieve. So you say, well, what can I do to change that? I'm just going to change the topic a wee bit, and the other main thing that a lot of people will be doing in the isolation of their homes is home working, and a lot of people have not ever done that before. We might use a computer or a laptop or a phone for sending texts and messages and looking up the odd website. But we may not be used to working remotely. And initially, that can have two sort of effects. One's quite exciting because you can do that. But secondly, it could be quite daunting in a number of ways, and not least the technological way. But it can be daunting, the fact that you feel isolated from, if you work with a team of people, you're not with that team anymore. And also in the house, there are other people. So this is where we come back to the idea of negotiating. Maybe you're going to work from for a couple of hours in the morning, maybe a couple of hours in the afternoon, but you have a designated space where that's going to be. And you've negotiated the fact that you won't be asked to go to the shops, or you won't be asked to take a government-sanctioned exercise at that moment, because you've negotiated, and so on. But
another point there, Andrew, is you know, have a bad day and you feel overloaded. It's about maybe just pulling back entirely and just looking at the day ahead 2 hours at a time.
Yes, yeah. And
the whole thing,
because it's not the same as working in your normal working environment. I mean, if you do work in a team, you could perhaps organise with other members of the team to have a 10:30 tea break virtually, and for half an hour, and just share bits and pieces, so you keep that sense of togetherness, and people feel supported by doing those sort of things.
The need for connectivity has really come to the fore, hasn't it, with this COVID-19?
Yeah, and it's really important, and in the wider sense of it is that connectivity, that socialness, because though some of us might not agree, we are sort of social beings, and we do need to connect with people. So just generally, have a virtual cup of coffee, have a beer with somebody. The odd thing is that since I've been working remotely, I've actually met more people and spoke to more of my friends than I would normally do, just because I've made more of an effort to do that. And
everybody's got more time to do that as well. But, you know, you haven't got anywhere else to be, have we? So, but I do think it does help to have it booked into your diary, because otherwise I think it's very easy to just not do it, do your full working day, or get all your work done and then sit in front of the telly thinking, I'm just going to have a glass of wine, or I'm just going to sit here all night. So I do think that kind of booking people in or having something in your diary, it kind of gives you something to look forward to as well then, which feels quite nice, because even if you've had a bit of a rubbish day or a bit of a crappy hour, because it's never terrible all day, it's normally about 10 minutes that you can sort of drag out as well. And I think that's something to remember. No such thing as a whole bad day, but just to think, okay, well, tomorrow I am catching up with such and such, just gives you something to look forward to, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's also, this time, like you touched on, is it's an opportunity to, what did you say, learn a guitar or a musical instrument, but to do something, or just look at things in that sort of more positive outlook, as opposed to, oh my God, why is this happening? It's terrible, it's awful.
I think that's
it is, but
people will be looking at this in very different ways. There'll be some people who feel completely powerless, completely hopeless, like it's just they get up every morning and just think, this is hideous, I can't do another day. And then you've got another set of people that don't feel like that are going, right, okay, what can I do today that's going to be different? I've got a full day with nothing planned, or I've got to get this bit of work done. But they're kind of seeing it in a completely different perspective, and a much more helpful and powerful perspective. And by having that perspective, they certainly feel a lot more in control.
I think if anyone's after a little bit of inspiration, I mean, possibly people who've tuned in have already seen it, but there's a really good interview that was done by Sky News recently, and I think it's in The Guardian and the papers, from Terry Waite, who was taken hostage in the 80s. And basically, I won't spoil the whole interview, but there's a really good line in there where he says, although I felt my life was being wasted, so Terry Waite, just to give you some background, was taken hostage in the Lebanon crisis in the 1980s. And he was held there for 5 years. But anyway, in the interview, he says, although I felt my life was being wasted, I had a unique opportunity to get to know myself better. And when I read that interview, I just thought, wow, you know, if somebody being held hostage for 5 years can think like that, then, you know, there's some lesson in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
It is. You know, you could use it as an opportunity to think about yourself, how you'd like to get to know yourself better. You could use it to learn more about your family or friends, as you've already pointed out, start a hobby, or even actually assess whether any of the new routines are working better for you. You know, there might be new routines you've taken on that you might even keep after lockdown's over.
Yeah. I don't know what you two think, Caroline and Andrew, but I think that perspective is a choice. Whether you're going to see this in a positive way or a negative way is a choice that you make. Do you two have the same opinion on that?
Oh yes, yeah. I think choice is a big thing, and we, whether we know it or not, we always have a choice. We always have a choice how we respond to something, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. We always have a choice. It's just realizing that we do have a choice.
In the example I'm giving you with Terry Waite, I think his viewpoint is he just ultimately did not want to be controlled by the situation. So, you know, we could take look at that, couldn't we, and think, how much do we want this situation to absolutely ultimately control every aspect of our lives? Mm-hmm. So, you know, at the beginning, no, I'm not going to tell you because you might want to go and look at it yourselves. But I think it's about looking at ways of taking back control.
Mm-hmm. But tying into what Andrew was saying earlier about people feeling out of control and trying to take it, he wasn't trying to control the situation he was in because he couldn't. You know, there was nothing he could do about that. So he was only taking control of the things that he could take control over, like the way that he responded and the thoughts that he created and how he felt about it. Those were things that he did have control over. He couldn't control the actual events, just like nobody can control the isolation or the lockdown or the virus. But there are other things you can control.
Mm-hmm. It comes back to that sense of perspective, how whether you see things. I don't know if I'm on this thing. Oh, anyway, can you see? I just want to show you a little thing to give you an idea. I don't know if you can see that glass. Can you see that glass?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it and see a sort of an approximate shape, I would say it's roughly a rectangle. Okay, sort of that sort of thing there. But if you look at it that way, then it's just a circle. But it's still a glass. So the way that we look at a situation can often determine the way we feel about it. Mm-hmm. So if we go into looking at something that's a bit in a fearful, negative sort of way, then we will start to see things in a fearful, negative way, and it will just spiral. Whereas if we tend to look at things in a much more positive way, then what can we do in this situation? We'll see it differently. So either the circle or the rectangle. And I don't know if anybody speaks Mandarin Chinese, but if you do, you might be able to help me on this, because I'm not 100% sure that this is true, but I've been told by a few people over years that this is true. That the Mandarin Chinese for crisis is two characters. And the first character is danger, and the second character represents opportunity. Mm. So that's quite a good way to look at it, in a sense. We can take control of what we can take control over without being controlling, because as we know, that if we're controlling, then we're not in control. But perspective is really, really quite important. One of the ways to help people that maybe feel anxious or worried is to be able to express this to people. Now, of course, if you're in a house and there's a couple of you there in the house and you both are feeling quite anxious and you start to express the anxiety, then you might just increase the overall anxiety in the house. So a way that you can start to do this is maybe write a diary or a journal and just write out your thoughts and fears there. And of course, if you're in a situation where you're just by yourself, then that's a way to do it as well. Or communicate with a friend that you feel that you can trust, and so on.
You could, the other thing you could do, Andrew, a little bit like your journal thing, is you could, despite it being a very ordinary day or whatever, or maybe even as you pointed out, it might have been a crappy day, but if you can push yourself to just make a note of a couple of things that you felt you did have some control over in the day, even if that was sitting out in the sun and having a cup of coffee, it can be something really quite ordinary, but you're just putting it down, you're training yourself to think differently.
I don't know if you can see, Caroline, but in the chat part, Lindsay's just more or less written the same sort of thing that you've just said. So thank you for that.
Oh, okay.
And I would say, and one thing that I encourage clients to do is to look for at least 2 or 3 things every day that are positive things. And they don't have to be massive, like Caroline says. It might just be sitting out having a cup of coffee. It might be completing a task. It might just be paying a bill or getting something done that you've been putting off for a while. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but actually, if you can see those positives, you can use those as a boost rather than just focusing on all the things that are rubbish, because that will make you feel worse. The thing that you focus on is going to equal how you feel.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's an old saying, with was it computers, that you put garbage in, you get garbage out. So what the question you ask yourself will determine the answer that you get, basically. Yeah.
The other thing that I would say, and that's quite a helpful thing to do, is there's a lot of things happening at the moment where people are having to cancel things. So people have got holidays booked, they've got weddings booked. My little boy had a christening, it's his first birthday coming up. All of those things have been cancelled. And lots of people are just feeling awful about those things and like, why has this happened to me? And totally out of control about them. But something that you can do is plan something lovely for when this is all over. It doesn't even have to be a set time, because you can't put a time frame on it at the minute. But if you start thinking, right, when all this is over, I really want to go to Canada or Cornwall, or I don't know why I've gone with sea, but somewhere that you really want, something that you really want to do.
The local shop.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything big. It might be a family get together. So I suspect that we're going to be planning my little boy's first birthday probably 3 months after it happens. But plan something for the future and don't put a time scale on it, because that's something to look forward to when all this is over as well. So even when you are having that bad time, you can think, do you know what, I'm going to leave that alone for 5 minutes. I'm going to add something else to my plan, or I'm going to just think about that for a bit to pep me back up again.
Yeah, because anxiety is basically an emotion that looks for confirmation. So if we've got anxiety, we see anxiety and we just build on it. So it comes back to that sense of perspective. But also along with this, we're bombarded every day with news, whether it be 24-hour news on Sky or BBC or any other news channel from around the world, social media. Now, nearly all of that news is about the numbers, the facts that people are in hospital, etc. It's all on the more negative side of things. And so we're just going to get more and more drawn into that. And so what I would suggest is to cut down on your news. And if you want to do something, just watch the daily briefings by the 4 nations of the United Kingdom, because that'll have the most up-to-date information if you want that. The other thing is to watch social media carefully, because that's basically mostly just about opinion, and opinion is not fact. It's just opinion, and anybody can have an opinion about anything, and there's lots of myths and rumors about things. What was it? The latest one is that the phone masts for 5G were one of the causes or made the virus worse. Well, as far as I'm aware, that's complete nonsense. But if there is something and it basically says, I heard this from my brother's dog, then it could be that it's perhaps not accurate. And even if it does come from somewhere that looks legitimate, it might be worthwhile just checking it out, and not sort of, because it just builds up the anxiety and makes things worse.
And people do, I think you're absolutely right what you've just said. People that struggle with anxiety almost seek those posts out, and they're the ones that share them the most on Facebook, almost like, oh, I'm right to feel anxious. You know, look at all this evidence that I've got. I'm justified in feeling this way. And then they share it with other people. And actually, if you do a quick Google search on it, it's usually a load of absolute nonsense. You think, why wouldn't you check? But actually, the fact that they're struggling with their anxiety, they don't need to check, because it doesn't matter whether it's real or not. It's just building on that feeling and justifying why they feel that way. So you were saying something about limiting your news or limiting your exposure. I think the other thing to do is when you have watched that side of it, is to balance it out with something else as well. And try and balance it with something more positive, or a happy story, or something completely different, a half an hour Lee Evans, or something on a comedy front that's nothing to do with it. I think it's important to balance it out a bit. Yeah,
that's good. Caroline, what were you saying?
No, I was only going to say, well, apparently 95% of all our opinions are pretty much set by the time we're 35. So where they're unhelpful, they need taking out and looking at.
That's just your opinion. Yeah.
Okay. That's just my opinion, yes.
Yeah. So
opinions can be changed with real evidence.
This is true, because opinions are just thoughts, and we can change our thoughts because we do all the time. But we can change them. And like I said, anxiety is just basically an emotion that's looking for confirmation. I think we've probably gone on too long for most people. And we could maybe just give that a break. If anybody's got any specific questions, then put them now. Or if you want to think about something and then get back to us, that would be great. And again, thank you, Lindsay, for your suggestion, useful advice. By the way, the three of us are not the fountains of all knowledge. We have a certain amount of expertise, but we don't know everything. So if you do have any opinions, factual opinions, or even just opinions, get in touch. So anything else you want to say?
Okay, so we have sort of got probably 5 minutes or so if anybody does want to type any questions.
Yeah.
I think we've all got the chat box up, so we are keeping an eye on that if anybody wants to throw anything in there.
Is anyone?
I lost you then. You went a bit funny then. I don't know if that was just on my computer.
Oh, well, I mean, a few people have said that, so I don't think it's anything to do with the computers. But, so if anybody wants to actually physically say something, then let me know and I'll unmute you. Okay. Oh, Nikki, thank you. Oh, that's very kind of you. And she's off to see the Terry Waite interview now. Which is good.
I suppose the other thing to say, Andrew, is that we are planning on doing more of these on different topics, or perhaps sort of areas of this in a little bit more depth, I think, aren't we?
Yeah, because some of you might have thought we've gone on a bit, but actually we could go on for quite a long time, getting more involved, doing all of this. As I say, if you've got any questions whatsoever, or you just want to make a comment, please get in touch. And we will do some more of these. And we're also going to do probably quick, maybe emergency podcasts, maybe, or maybe not. So from me, I'll say goodbye and thank you all for coming. Abby?
Yeah, thank you. It's lovely to see everybody, and it's nice to have so many people. I'm just going to leave you with one thought. 5% 5% of life happens to you. The other 95% is how you choose to react to it. Bear that in mind. But thank you for coming along, and we hope to see you again.
Yeah, Caroline?
Yes, cheerio everyone. I'm sorry I can't actually see you because I'm just looking at a blank screen, but nice to talk to you and hopefully speak to you soon. Take care.
Okay, thank you very much, and good night.
Good night.
Good night.